just like humans. That's the message from a man who lost both his arms after delay in medical care.
His story has Scott County paying more than $12 million. Susan Elizabeth Littlefield walks us through the disturbing lawsuit.
But you gotta use your body to open and close it.
Terrence Winburn is relearning to eat.
You know, put a spoon there, which is hard work though, trying to open it like this.
He's relearning to live.
Because every time I dream I have my hands, you know. Then I wake up, they're gone again. I'd rather have my hands than anything.
It started when Terrence was booked in the Scott County Jail for suspicion of drunk driving. Documents reveal how his health quickly deteriorated. A nurse noted he was mumbling and holding his right hand. He was sent back to his cell and referred again to the nurse, who gave him acetaminophen. It wasn't until he fell off his bed in 4 trips to the nurse that he was taken to the local hospital, then quickly sent to Abbott's ICU. These graphic photos show a bacterial infection was raging. Sepsis was taking over, and he was in organ failure. He had a stroke and a heart attack, a case that got the attention of Robbins Kaplan attorneys.
When you're hearing this, you're thinking it's, okay, what can we do?
They were able to do a lot. Scott County and their insurers paid out $12 million.
But he would have not had nearly the outcome that he had. He'd still have likely both arms, wouldn't have suffered the heart attack, wouldn't have suffered the stroke.
You know, it's something what nobody want to go through, you know. And I really can't explain it because it's been so many times I thought I've been passed away. And it's just hard to explain.
Now, he's hoping his pain will aid others.
More, you know, caring for the inmates there because we are still human, you know.
Now, we did, of course, reach out to Scott County. They have hired their own counsel to handle the case. Their counsel sent us this response saying the county and insurer are hopeful the resolution of this matter will help provide Mr. Winburn with the medical care and quality of life assistance he needs. And one more note, Terrence was fully acquitted of that drunk driving charge. Frank?
Those who are on Rikers now, because of bail reform and because of other reforms, you really have to do something bad to go to Rikers. So now, are we as a city willing to say that 2,000 extremely dangerous people, because we don't have enough space, we're going to turn them back onto the streets and back to the communities that they committed these crimes in the first place? I'm not ready to say that. And so I think the city council must look at this plan, where 50% of the people there have mental health illness, and see how do we come up with a plan that gets the reform we're looking for and the safety that we're looking for.
A new class of correction officers was sworn in this morning amid turmoil surrounding control of Rikers Island.
Now tonight, we're hearing from the correction commissioner for the first time, ever since a federal prosecutor suggested an outside authority takes control of the jail. News 4's Miles Miller has the story.
To the best of my ability.
128 recruits sworn into the New York City Correction Department today, the first step in the training academy before patrolling Rikers Island.
It is a career and responsibility, like I said, that few can do, but many think they know how it should be done.
These recruits are joining DOC at a time when the department is under fire. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, Damian Williams, said his office is pursuing contempt proceedings against the city after a federal monitor said the city hadn't met its obligations under a series of court orders pertaining to conditions inside. Williams said in a statement earlier this week, Rikers Island has been in crisis for years. This is a collective failure with deep roots spanning multiple mayoral administrations and DOC commissioners. But after 8 years of trying every tool in the toolkit, we cannot wait any longer for substantial progress to materialize. That is why my office will seek a court-appointed receiver to address the conditions on Rikers Island.
This department over decades, for many decades, has not received support, significant disinvestment, that put us in a situation when we inherited this department in January of 2022, it was on the brink of collapse.
Rikers Island has been under federal oversight since 2015 after a class action lawsuit against the department regarding overuse of excessive force. Last year, 19 people died in Department of Correction custody.
So to the extent that they've stabilized in the past few months, they're stabilizing at a very high rate.
Judge Swain's rebuke of the correction department was stinging. These concerns raise questions as to whether defendant, DOC, are capable of safe and proper management of the jails. Indeed, these issues are serious, urgent, and call for specific responses and prompt, effective action by DOC. Both sides return to court next month. I'm Miles Miller, News 4 New York.
I'm Maurice Dubois. We begin here at 5:30 with the 9th in-custody correction department death at Rikers this year.
The Rikers Federal Monitor released a new report today on the city's troubled jail system as a judge considers whether a federal receiver should take over Rikers. CBS 2 investigative reporter Tim McNicholas joining us now with that report. Tim.
Dana and Maurice, the Department of Correction has said for months that conditions are improving, but this new report says Rikers remains unsafe and the DOC's efforts to improve have been, quote, superficial, poorly implemented, or ineffective. The Federal Monitor says there were 74 fights at Rikers during 1 week alone in September. This image from a Rikers security camera shows one inmate attacking another the morning of September 14th. The new report says the bloodied inmate walked back to his cell and didn't get treatment for his broken nose and other injuries for more than 5 hours, even though a correction officer had walked by the collapsed victim in a stairwell just minutes after the attack. Serena Townsend is a defense attorney and former DOC deputy commissioner who oversaw internal affairs and staff discipline.
We have seen so many reports of people having injuries on Rikers Island that are only exacerbated by the fact that they're not getting treated.
The Federal Monitor says on September 17th, inmates walked in and out of a cell where a fight lasted about 90 seconds, and an officer had unlocked the cell and then walked away just before that fight. 2 days after the attack, a victim was taken to a clinic where medical staff discovered a fracture on the left side of his face. The report also criticizes the DOC for not promptly reporting assaults internally or to the monitoring team.
It seemed to me like the Monitor is assessing not only the conditions on Rikers Island, but Commissioner Molina's ability and willingness to be transparent.
On August 23rd, an inmate brutally attacked an officer, and DOC Commissioner Luis Molina released a statement saying, "I want to commend the second officer who intervened and stopped the attack." But the new report says the attack was stopped by another inmate, and the second officer only came on the scene after a second incarcerated individual had pulled off the assailant. The Federal Monitor cites that as an example of his claim that Molina makes public statements that distort the current state of affairs.
This Monitor's report comes as close as it ever has to supporting federal receivership.
And we reached out to the DOC just before noon today, just after we obtained this report, to ask how they are responding to the claims in here, and we are still waiting to hear back. Dana, Maurice.
Officials and advocates rallied at City Hall Park to continue their fight to end solitary confinement. This rally happening just as we received news about another death at Rikers Island. We now know the identity of that person. News 12's Valerie Ryan has the details.
The Department of Corrections confirmed an individual was found unresponsive and pronounced dead just after 6 a.m. this morning. 27-year-old Manish Kunwar is the 9th person to die in the hands of New York City jails this year.
The person who died today, they said, was there for only a week. The numbers don't lie. Lives being lost, you can't bring back.
That's why public advocate Jumani Williams and other city officials are pushing for intro number 549 to be passed. That would end solitary confinement for good.
Truly trying to make sure that this torture, this level of barbaric torture, ends for everyone across the board.
Officials say this legislation would add healthy alternatives to solitary, like pro-social programs. And at the rally, Arlene Normile shared a poem that her son wrote about solitary conditions as he is currently behind bars.
Absent interaction, 4 walls close in, paranoid delusions, decompensation begins.
Many people shared their stories at the rally, and they all had one common ask.
Got to find a better system.
Advocates say they will continue to fight And as for 27-year-old Manish Kunwar, we are still awaiting to hear back from the medical examiner to give us an official cause of death. At City Hall Park, I'm Valerie Ryan, News 12.
Victims of alleged child sex abuse suing the state of Maryland now over crimes they say took place decades ago.
It's all thanks to a new law that lists the civil statute of limitations on these kinds of cases. Kelsey Kushner joins us live at 11. She spoke with an attorney tonight who represents the victims. And Kelsey, what did he have to say?
Rick, well, he tells me that number of victims just keeps climbing. We're now at over 400 victims who are now coming forward, each with a similar story. They say they all experienced some type of abuse while they were inside a Maryland Juvenile Justice Center. He tells me that this lawsuit not only gives them a voice to now speak about their experience, but also hopefully make sure that nobody else falls victim.
I used to hear keys turn at night, but I never knew what it was until it happened personally to me.
What should have been a moment of reform for Claudia McLean turned into a lifetime of trauma.
I'm just starting to come to terms with about 10 years ago, to be honest.
Her story is echoed by over 400 victims now coming forward, claiming they too experienced sexual, emotional, and physical abuse in a Maryland juvenile detention center decades ago, and soon justice could be served.
Their predator simply walked in and chose them at random to do whatever act they wanted them to do.
Martin Ramey with Ryan Law Firm is one of 4 law firms leading lawsuits against the state of Maryland, alleging it failed to protect children in its care. Ramey says the complaints allege hundreds of incidents spanning from the 1960s to 2020 at several centers across the state, including the Charles H. Hickey Jr. School and the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center. All of the survivors in the complaint were children at the time.
The youngest that we've heard of, unfortunately, it was as young as 7.
Ramey says the lawsuits were filed the same day the Maryland Child Victims Act went into effect on October 1st, which eliminated the statute of limitations on civil lawsuits for child sex abuse cases in this state. In a statement to WJZ, the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services says, in part, the DJS takes the allegations of sexual abuse seriously. They went on to say the department is currently reviewing the lawsuit.
Children reported these instances to guards, and they turned a blind eye. Someone has to be accountable.
Ramey says this lawsuit is about providing justice for victims like McLean, who was forced to stay quiet for so long.
Without them, we still be sitting in silence.
And we did reach out to the Maryland Attorney General's office for comment, but they tell us that they cannot comment on pending litigation. Reporting live tonight, Kelsey Kushner for WJZ.
That doesn't stop lawmakers from filing bills. State Capitol reporter Chris O'Brien takes a peek at one of the first new bills that deals with both juvenile justice and gun reform.
It's a bill that intersects 2 hot-button issues in Tennessee.
What we found out in most active shooter things is they're young adults. Their lobes aren't frontal lobes are not fully developed.
Cookeville Republican Representative Ryan Williams filed a new bill ahead of regular session. In essence, it would make it so anyone who has committed a felony or a misdemeanor of cruelty toward animals as a juvenile would be prohibited from purchasing or possessing a firearm until the juvenile reaches 25 years of age.
My thought was, how can we delay, not prevent them from being able to buy a weapon in the future, but how can we delay that so that there's actually a penalty to them for committing those acts, and so that they can reestablish themselves.
The bill will draw Democratic support, at least as it's currently written.
You know, a lot of bills get filed that look great, but they tend to get amended or take on other forms, you know, and used as more of a caption bill.
With that being said, the bill does seemingly address juvenile justice, an issue for Republicans, and gun control, an issue for Democrats.
We don't have a monopoly on good ideas, and we'll look at anything that anybody proposes and vote for something if it's a good policy that's going to better protect our children and our families.
With Republicans typically aiming not to restrict firearm purchases, I admitted to Williams I was a little surprised by the language.
It's something that we all can coalesce around that I think is good for our youth in Tennessee, and also a real deterrent.
But the fact that the bill comes from a Republican gives it a much better chance for survival. In Nashville, Chris O'Brien.
And remember, this is one of the first new bills of the regular session. Any bill that lawmakers choose to kick to 2024 from last session still
in our city's jails while waiting for their trials may not have to wait as long. A new push from City Council aims to reduce that amount of time. The council announced detainees wait an average of 115 days at Rikers Island, which is 4 times the national average. To fix the issue, she wants to hold the Department of Corrections accountable for bringing defendants to their trials on time, which can help relieve many other problems that our city's jails and inmates are facing.
When people are not produced for court, it further stresses an already backlogged court system. It can delay a person's release. It can eventually cause death. It delays connection to mental health programs and substance use disorder services if needed, and much, much more.
More than 25% of people detained in city jails were not brought to court on time between September and December of last year.
Breaking news out of Prince George tonight, where a juvenile male is dead after a shooting at the Pine Ridge Mobile Home Park. You're watching 8 News at 11. I'm Eric Phillips.
And I'm Heather Hope in for Deanna Albritton tonight. Prince George police say officers responded to the mobile home park on Swift Street at 7:10 for a shooting. When they arrived, they found a juvenile male with a gunshot wound. He later died from his injuries. Our 8 News crews rushed out to the residence tonight and spoke with neighbors about this tragic incident.
I had my grandkids come over here, and it makes it where you wonder if you want to let them go down there by themselves, because you never know what happens, because that right there is wrong. No kid should die, no kid should get shot. This is a country. It's a little place that this shouldn't happen here. I hope they catch them. I hope they lock them up for a long time.
Now, this investigation is ongoing, and officers are encouraging anyone who knows anything about this shooting to give them a call right away.
She's got more details. Valerie, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Dan, the Department of Corrections confirms an individual whose name is being withheld was found unresponsive and pronounced dead earlier this morning. And advocates say New York City jails continue to kill and torture people, and they want to put an end to solitary confinement. Public advocate Jumaane Williams, city officials, and other advocates are urging City Council to pass and Mayor Adams to sign Intro 549. This legislation is veto-proof with supermajority support, and it would end solitary confinement for good and add healthier alternatives like pro-social programs. The co-founder of Jails Action Coalition says she started the program back in 2011 to shed light on the unacceptable conditions in New York City jails.
Truly trying to make sure that this torture, this level of barbaric torture, ends for everyone across the board. Numbers don't lie. Lives being lost, you can't bring back, but you can fight and make change for tomorrow.
Today marks the 9th death in the hands of New York City jails, and as we're still awaiting to hear back from the medical examiner as to an official cause of death. For now, that's the latest here from City Hall Park. I'm Valerie Ryan, News 12.
That's how a psychiatrist described the apparent imprisonment of a Jupiter boy in his family's garage. Jurors heard that testimony today in the teenager's father's trial, Timothy Fairder. They also heard and saw much more in recorded video from that jail cell-like room where the boy was locked up. The doctor testified after watching hours of surveillance video of the boy confined and also berated by his father.
Investigative reporter Terry Parker was in the courtroom and also saw those videos. And Terry, what were they like?
I can tell you that after watching those videos that they are certainly damaging to the defense. In one of them, we see Timothy Fairder pushing his son, screaming at him, threatening. And then in a heartbreaking aftermath, we see the boy alone in the pitch dark crying night after night. The doctor who testified called it sadistic and torture.
This is video of Timothy Fairder installing a Ring camera in the box-like room he built in his garage to confine his teenage son. But the videos he captured are now coming back to haunt him, being played in his false imprisonment trial as evidence of child abuse. One of the videos showed Tim Fairder grab the boy, push him, and scream threats.
You want to take this thing to the next level? Let's do it. Let's do it in Florida, too. Let's do it in Florida, too. Let's go.
Then he slams out, turns out the light, and you hear the boy crying alone in the dark.
He's afraid of another
abusive episode occurring or being harmed, or he said he was even afraid of being killed.
Dr. Wade Myers testified for the state after watching the videos. We're not showing them so as not to identify the boy, but they depict day after day of the boy being woken up, spoken to briefly by his mother Tracy, going to school, and then coming straight back to being locked in the box again. Often his few books or meals were taken away or lights turned off as punishment.
He's literally, for 3 years, spending most of his life, the majority of it, in solitary confinement with very little stimulation and interaction when he is in there.
Farragher's attorneys asked the doctor about the boy's psychological problems, including oppositional defiance disorder. He said he'd need to know more about the boy's circumstances when that diagnosis was made. But earlier he said this.
There's no set of circumstances concerning a child's behavior that would justify this sort of really torturous behavior.
In fact, Dr. Myers testified that the boy would have been treated better in a juvenile detention facility. At least there, he said, the lights wouldn't be taken away, his meals wouldn't be withheld, he'd have books to read, and he wouldn't have to use the bathroom in a bucket. He could go to an actual toilet instead. The testimony continues early tomorrow, starting at 8 a.m., and this trial will continue into next week. We will be covering all aspects of it for you. Live in West Palm Beach, I'm Terry Parker, WPBF 25 News.